The 8th Japan-Africa Investment Conference is underway in Tunisia's capital city, Tunis. Tokyo wants to challenge China's presence on the mother continent, which has grown significantly over the decades. Both Japan and China have been major industry players in Africa. Joining us now to tell us why Japan is pushing its investment on the continent is Peter Fabricius from the Institute for Security Studies. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. Japan opens this conference in Tunisia with an objective in mind. It essentially wants to lay down the markers about Russia and Japan and China, doesn't it?
Yeah, hi. Of course, that certainly is the political objective. I think we're going to have to see to what extent they get any, support by the Africans for any kind of declarations on that. But and if that happens, that would be like first prize for Japan. But obviously, there's a lot more to it as well. Mm-hmm. And it's not just an investment conference. Actually, it's really a conference about the whole kind of range of relations between Japan and the continent. So the Prime Minister, the Japanese Prime Minister, couldn't attend in person because he's got COVID, but he delivered a live online message and announced that, amongst other things, Japan would be investing a total of $30 billion US in Africa over the next 3 years, public and private. So that is quite a big number.
Let's talk about the controversy around the venue. It has now become something of an embarrassment for Japan. Why is that?
Yeah, unfortunately, what's happened is that the president there, Said, has kind of taken Tunisia on a downward path since last year, when he basically kind of suspended Parliament and the Prime Minister and has been ruling effectively by decree. I mean, there was a lot of controversy in the politics and a lot of controversy about the politicians unable to get their act together, but he took this very drastic action. And so the democracy project in Tunisia, which was regarded as the only success of the Arab Spring, actually, the 2011 Arab Spring, is now very much in jeopardy. So that is a bit embarrassing for Japan. They've said, well, they hope that Tunisia will find its way back to the path of democracy and so on, but that's a bit of an if.
Yeah. You say it's quite a big one for Japan. In terms of scale, how big is it exactly? Who's expected to attend?
I don't know exactly who's there, but something like 30 heads are there. People like Macky Sall, obviously the Tunisian president, and others. So, I mean, unfortunately, President Ramaphosa is not there. I wasn't told why. I just told that he wasn't going to be there, which is, I think, quite disappointing for the Japanese, because he's always a big prize to have at these meetings. And, because of South Africa's closeness with China, I think the Japanese particularly, he was at the last one, so I think it's always a big one for them to get him to come. And I don't know whether that's related somehow to South Africa's BRICS membership and its closeness to China, but he's just not there.
You say it's not just an investment conference. How significant will the issue then of sustainability be on the agenda of the summit? Because we know Japan has made reference to the impact of the pandemic and the Ukraine war.
Yeah, look, it's not just investment. It's called the Tokyo International Conference on African Development. So it's about, Africa relations with Japan, particularly focused on development. But sustainability is very much an underlying principle of TCAD versus maybe, let us say, FOCAC, which is the Chinese equivalent. Because although we've seen quite a big number now, 30 billion commitment pledged by the Japanese Prime Minister over the next 3 years, generally, China comes up with much bigger figures, like 60 billion or 40 billion or whatever at each of the FOCAC meetings. And Japan focuses much more on underlying, education, peacemaking, debt management, and so on. A lot of, focus on business too. So this one is one of the big focus points at this meeting is going to be to try and improve and increase Japanese investment, private sector investment, which in fact it hasn't been very high, a source of some concern to Japan and to Africa, I would think.
What about security relations?
Yeah, Japan has a big focus on peacekeeping, and it's put a lot of money into and training and so on into supporting Africa's peacekeeping efforts. Again, that you could also regard that as being one of the aspects of sustainability. Obviously, a peaceful continent is indispensable if there's going to be development. And there is a sense that Japan might have put more focus on this over the last 10 years or so. There was a major incident back then in Algeria when quite a few Japanese workers on an oil plant were murdered by jihad extremists, and that's kind of shook Japan. That may actually be one of the reasons why investment has also declined somewhat since the last 10 years. I think Asian countries generally tend to be quite risk averse when it comes to investment, and Japan, I think, maybe even more so. I mean, if you compare with China, which is always inevitable, Chinese investors and so on, to some degree, are compelled, if you like, or certainly strongly encouraged by their government to do so. The Japanese and private sector is completely independent and can make independent decisions and have been rather reluctant. And so that reflects also on Africa, of course. And I mean, so Africa needs to get its act together as well.
Yeah. Well, with no certainty on whether or not President Cyril Ramaphosa is attending, why would it be important for South Africa to indeed have a representative there?
Yeah, I presume South Africa is represented at some level.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think the international relations minister is necessarily there, but yeah, I think it's important because Japan is Japan is an important investor in this country. South Africa is possibly one of the biggest investment destinations for Japan. So relations are important, and they share many goals. Peacekeeping and so on. We have a big commitment to peacekeeping and peacemaking on the continent, silencing the guns. It was a major theme when we were chairing the African Union last year. So there's a lot in common, and the Japanese also put quite a lot of money at this conference into fighting COVID, which we've done. So there's shared goals.
How much inspiration can be drawn with the Africa-China relations in terms of, boosting the economy, especially looking at the challenges of the economy in the continent?
Sorry, would you just repeat that question? You faded.
Perhaps let's talk about what inspiration that can be drawn from the Africa-China dynamics, especially looking at the challenges that the continent is facing with the economy.
Yeah. Yeah, look, there's undoubtedly quite a lot of a sense of competition that one gets from Japan and China. I mean, they're kind of near neighbors across a narrow stretch of ocean, and they're very competitive. Japan is very, very, very aware of this giant that it lives next to, and growing ever stronger. So, I mean, one of the elements, as we touched on earlier, in this conference is the emphasis, and the Prime Minister brought it up again, on a free and open Indo-Pacific, and hoping for African support for that. And what that means is actually expressing concern about Japan expanding its claims on islands in the South China Sea and expanding its economic zones so that others can't pass through without its clearance and so on. And economically, yeah, I mean, the emphasis of Japan's, as I said, Japan's economic approach is very much on sustainability, on debt is important, on managing debt, and that's a reflection to an allusion, without being explicit about it, to the fact that a lot of African countries have got into overwhelming and unsustainable debt to China by taking on massive loans. So what Japan is saying is, we won't do the same, and we will help you to deal with these debts.
Very well. Thank you so much for weighing in on this discussion. Peter Fabricius from the Institute for Security Studies. Thank you for your time.